Thank you for joining me for this step-by-step video for sunflowers. Just to get started, the surface that I used for this piece was from Dollar Tree. As you can see, it was a $3 surface, a stretch canvas, and hopefully they'll be available at the Dollar Tree near you. If not, you can always adapt it to a surface of your choice or have one cut for this design. Anyway, so I just wanted to let you know, hey, I looked for a cheap surface for you this time. So the first thing that I did to the surface is I actually gave it a coat of warm white paint, just to kind of fill in the little nooks and crannies a little bit. It's still going to have texture, but not quite as much as it did without the coating of warm white over it. So then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to take some matcha green, which is a kind of a cool color. Doesn't get used too often. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a very light wash. I'm going to thin this paint down quite a bit. I just want to have a hint of that green in the background. So you want to get out as large a brush as you have. This one is a 2-inch brush. Got it on sale somewhere, and so it's my go-to for applying washes or base coating large pieces. So I'm going to thin this paint down quite a bit because, like I said, I don't want it to be real bright. I just want it to tint that background a little bit. Streaks and stuff are going to be just fine. So don't worry about that too much. So let's give this a quick coat. See, that's just a tint of that color. Not blaring in your face kind of green. I just want to give that background just a hint of color. And let's see, let's get it all the way around. So it looks a little streaky, and that's fine. I'm going to just tint the sides a little bit because it already ran down some of the sides. And if your piece doesn't have sides, lucky you. And the last one, let's get a little bit of color on that side edge. Okay, now before this dries, what I want to do is I want to take some lush green, which is a fairly new color by DecoArt, and I'm going to thin it down just a little bit. Well, not just a little bit, quite a bit. Not as much as I did the matcha green. But what I want to do is I want to spatter on this surface before the surface actually dries, because I want the spatters to bleed and spread. So I'm just going to lightly spatter. I guess a little heavier than lightly. Did you see how nice those are spreading and bleeding out, not staying? In little dots. So that's exactly what I want. And I'm going to go around and especially spatter around the edges. I spattered in the center, but I'm going to spatter around the edges just a little heavier because that's where my greenery is going to be. And I kind of want this for the background of that greenery. All right, so we need to let this dry, and we're going to apply the pattern just for the greenery level of this piece. So I'll be back after this is dried and I've applied my pattern. All right, so I know it's hard to see the pattern that I put on here, and that's a good thing. You don't want to put it on too dark. So one of the first things we're going to do is all the leaves are basically painted in the same color. What's going to make a difference in them is whether I actually base them in or whether I just float shading on them. So the first thing I'm going to do is these larger pointy leaves that are off, they're dispersed through here in a few places. I'm going to line their stems and paint them in with a wash of lush green. So the first thing I'm going to do is take my small liner brush, thin down some lush green, and I'm just going to line the stems on those. So just very thin line. You don't need a whole lot of width in these. But because of the canvas, it kind of bleeds a little bit, so they get wider without you even trying. So right now I'm just going to work on these leaves. So there's some there. I think there's one right in here. Get a point on that. Okay, and then there are a few tucked in here. So I'm just going to line those stems with thin, lush green. All right. Now both sides of this canvas are the same. So I'm basically just going to work on one side, and then I'll turn the camera off and go do exactly what I just did on one side to the other side. So for right now, I'm going to keep the stems lined the way they are, and I'm going to head over to the other side and line those in. All right, so the next step in the process is we are going to base in each of those leaves. There's going to be 4, 8, 9 of them, and those are going to be based in with a wash of lush green. You don't want it to be real dark. So I'm just going to base those in. And yes, there are some leaves that are on top of these, but it'll be okay. We're working on just these pointy leaves right now. Too much water. But that's okay because I can spread it around. All right. I'm liking this already. Nice and soft. Sorry, my phone is going a little crazy. So you do want to keep your pattern handy. So if you lose where a leaf is or something, you can always kind of figure out where it is from your pattern, which I've had to do a couple times already. I'm pretty sure that this piece is basically going to be painted in washes of color. So there you go. That looks nice. I'm going to head to the other side and do that, and I'll be back. All right. So what we're going to do to these leaves now is we are going to float just a touch of lush green in the base of each of those leaves. So corner load into the full strength paint and blend it out nice. so you don't get too strong on the float. And you're just going to go in the bottom of each of these leaves. Just to give them a little bit more depth. I like them the way they are, but we're not gonna just leave them like this. So we're not gonna do much to them. That just gives them a little bit more dimension. Now obviously this is out of my comfort zone. I'm used to painting cute things that usually involve Halloween or Christmas. So this is a step out for me, and I hope that you enjoy it. Trying to be very careful that I keep these nice soft floats and not get too heavy. Thankfully, there's only 9 of these leaves. All right, and you can see the difference between these leaves here and those. So I'm going to go float shading on the other side, and I'll be back. So the next leaves that we are going to work on are the ones that are have kind of oval shaped leaves. Again, we want to line the stems on those, and I'm going to line them with thin lush green, but I'm going to pick up a little bit of matcha green too. I want to lighten it up just a little bit, just to make it a little different from. And there's only let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of these leaves. We've got one little solo guy going over here, and I'm just going to go right over that leaf I just painted and line that stem. And then let's line this other stems. Such proper English. Line the other stems. See, it's just a tad lighter, not too terrible. Alright, so I'm going to turn this around. I'll let you enjoy me doing that on the other side too. So this stem kind of has a little bit of an S curve to it. And these are just your everyday run-of-the-mill curvy stems. And if you want to add more leaves, you're more than welcome to. It's your piece. All right. So let's try this real quick. And then what we'll do is we'll go on and float color on to base in these leaves. I'm going to turn to the side I started with. And this one we are going to float on these leaves with lush green plus a touch of matcha. You just want to brush mix it. Corner load into your lush green and blend it a little bit, and then corner load into matcha and blend that a little bit. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to come and float in the bottom of each of these. And once I get the bottoms done, I'll come back and float the tops. So what I'll be doing is using this background as a highlight. Rather than floating some highlighting, I'm just going to use the background color to be my highlight. And this is where if you got the pattern on a little wonky, you can always fix it with your floats. You can make your leaves a little more oval or a little less oval, whichever you prefer. Go ahead and do the other side. I'm going to reload. So I corner into lush green, blend a couple times, and then corner into matcha. So I lighten that up a little bit. Apparently I didn't put a pattern on for this leaf. So we'll just wing it. That's how easy these leaves are. Alright. 2 more bottoms to go, and then we can work on the tops. Alright. I'm going to turn this over, and I'm going to do the same thing to the tops of these leaves. I'm just going to go around the top and float, and then I've kept some of that light in the center. I'm going to load again. Used up my pile that I had kind of brushed mixed together. Alright. Quick and easy leaves. Right, go do the other side. And you can thank me later for not putting too many leaves on this. And now you see why you shouldn't put your pattern on too dark, because you don't really want it to show through these sheer leaves. All right, cool. Now we have a few we have one really long kind of flat grass here that I want to paint with a round brush, and I'm going to do that with some thin matcha green. It's actually set behind these leaves, so when you get to these little oval leaves, you want to go around them. So just quick base in of a wash of matcha. could have done this first, but that would have been the perfect way to do it, and I don't do anything perfectly. I gave up trying to be perfect. Now there's only one of those, so if you wanted to go in and add more of those kind of long leaves, that would be fine. I was just trying to bring in some different shapes to make this leaf background, this foliage background, a little more interesting. All right, so there are some leaves, stems that have kind of comma stroke shaped leaves that we want to add. I think they're in just a couple of places, and then some that kind of come along this border here. And so what we want to do first is we want to line that stem on those with the matcha and lush green mix. More matcha this time than lush green. So liner brush and a matcha lush green mix. And these are going to go right over those first leaves that we painted. So line that center vein line, that center stem. Over here, it's got one center stem and then it splits. And it has a little curl on the end. So you want to be sure to take your time as you go around those curls. Keep your liner brush as straight up and down as you can, and that will let you have a little bit more control. So I'm going to go here, do my little curl on that end, and then this side gets another little curl. This one's not going to go as easy for me. There's always one that gives me trouble. And let's do these side things, and they just kind of start somewhere in here, in between these two pointy leaves over here. And basically this was just a filler to fill up the area on the side here. So just take your time. And I'm going to wing this one. And it goes a little bit farther down. One side goes quite a ways, and this side kind of ends into those pointy flowers. So let's go on the other side and do our stems here. So if you take your time, you should be able to navigate those curves, curls, pretty simply. Don't get in a hurry, that's all. no need to get in a hurry. And apparently no need to put the entire pattern on, because I didn't put it on for that. You don't want them to be exactly alike anyway. And then there's going to be one over here. And we'll do our side ones. They don't have to be perfect, thank goodness. I'd be in a whole lot of trouble if I was going for perfection. And again, just kind of winging this one because it's so long. All right, I didn't make that one quite as long as I made the other one, but that's perfectly fine. Okay, so one of the first things I want to do is on this long kind of leafy thing, I am going to float just a touch of some very well blended out, nice and soft, lush green. Down the back or the inside edge, just to make it stand out just a touch more. So I'll head over to the other side and do that. Then I want to take a round brush. I think this is an 0, but I'm not sure. Could be a 1. I've worn the numbers off. And on these leaves right here, I'm going to paint them in with a wash of matcha green. And they're just kind of like comma strokes. So you make your wash, and then you want to make sure that you pick up a bit of color on the tip of your brush so you can get a nice stroke there. And if they're not nice, it'll still look good. All right. And as always, one way always goes easier than the other. I'm going to add one more on this side. So the pattern is kind of evolving as I paint. All right. The one, let's go over and do this little one down here. It actually has strokes on both sides. So let's do that. Center one first at the top. And then we're going to come down both sides and add. And yes, it's going to go right over that nice green leaf that you did already. But it'll be okay. All right. And I think I will go to the other side so I can let those dry before I tackle the other ones. Okay. This is going to be great background for our flowers. And I think this stem is going to get less than the one on the other side. I think I started out a little bigger. All right, but it's perfectly fine. The pattern is just a suggestion anyway, right? Let's do our other little one here. Okay, sorry for the silence. Common strokes take a little concentration. Let's go back to this side and we will work on this stem. Let's see. Actually put the pattern on much larger than I really want those strokes to be. And let's go and add, I'm going to come at these down here from upside down. I think it'll be just a little easier. Okay. And we'll do this side. Let me just erase some of that pattern right now. With the base coat of warm white on there, it makes it a little easier to erase patterns than if you were erasing off straight canvas. So very easy little comma stroke leaves. And we'll finish the other side here on this one. All right. Now I do believe we just have one more leaf kind of foliage thing that's right in here, and we're going to go ahead and line that stem line with thin lush green. Try to keep your hand out of these leaves over here, but it just comes from down here. I'm going to stop when I get to this oval leaf. I want it to be behind, the stem to be behind. And I'm just going to go all the way up there. Let's do this on the other side. Stopping when I get to that oval leaf and coming out the other side. And then what I want to do is I want to take my liner brush and I'm just going to set down little ovals They don't have to all face the same way. They're kind of tiny. But just kind of like grass that's gone to seed. It's wider at the bottom. All right, so we're going to work on the leaves that go onto this little side tendril here. And those are going to be painted with a round brush and with some thinned down matcha green. And they're just really transparent. You don't need a whole lot of paint. We're just going to follow this tendril all the way down. And then I will come back and put some on the opposite side where they'll fit. So it's not going to be everywhere. And these aren't the focal point anyway. They're just kind of filler. Alright, so we're going to do that all the way around. So there's a lot of little leaves that you can stroke on here. By the time you get done with these little tendrils, you should be a pro at stroking on these little comma stroke like leaves. Okay, almost done with the foliage background. So once we get the foliage background done, you want to make sure everything is dry. And then what you're going to do is you're going to come in with the floral layer and apply that pattern. One side always looks better than the other. Just the business of painting comma strokes. I think I'll go paint this side and then come back and do the other side. Give that a little time to dry. Okay. So a kind of a quick little background here. Not too hard, not too much of that floating thing. And the flowers are going to be done in much the same way. Just washes of color and some shading to bring them out a little bit more. So I'm going to let this dry. I'm going to put the pattern on for the flowers and we'll get back to painting. All right, so the flowers we're going to work on first are, there are 3 kind of bluish purplish flowers. And we'll work on those first. So what you want to do first is put out some Provence Sky and make a wash. Again, these are going to be based in with washes of color. So let's base in those petals on these flowers with a wash of Provence Sky. Starting to add some different colors now, but not too many. Keeping it simple. These are kind of basic 5-petal flowers. They're not perfect because if you look at wildflowers, they're not perfect. One flower kind of overlaps the other one here. There are 2 here kind of center and then one over off to the right side. So what I'll do is, as I did when we started this video, I'll base in the flowers on one side and then go off camera to base in the other side. All right. So I'll see you back in just a few. Okay, so I want to lighten up the tips of these petals. So I'm going to do that with a nice soft float of warm white. So just warm white, blend it out so it's nice and soft. And just highlight. And it's going to go on bright, but it will tone down after it dries. So all the petals, just float the tips with some warm white to lighten them up a little bit. Now, this petal here goes a little behind another petal, so you only have a little touch that needs to get highlighted. Here we'll get that petal that's in front. You can see already how much that has toned down. So I may go back and float that again just to pop it up just a little more. because I think I want to see that white a little bit more. So basically what I'm saying is I blended it out a little more than I needed to. And that's the thing. If it's not bright enough, you just go back and highlight it again. All these petals. And some of them go off the edge, so you don't have to worry about it. Turn around and do the other side. Nice little blue flowers. None of the colors on here are going to be too terrible bright. I wanted to keep it kind of soft. All right, this one needs a little bit right there. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to add just a little bit more color to these flowers. I'm going to take Perfect Perry, which is a nice little purple. Just need a touch. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to float Perfect Perry at the base of each flower petal. Let's see, I could get a little closer. We're not going to get rid of that blue completely. We just want to tuck some of this purple in around the center of the flower, just to give it a little bit different touch. So it doesn't change the color of the flower too terrible much. And basically you're just kind of tucking the corner of your side-loaded brush into the center. All right, I like that. Of course, I pay myself to say that. I think I need to blend that out just a little bit more. A little heavy. So just tucking a little bit of Perfect Perry at the base of each of these petals. these aren't any real type of wildflower per se. I couldn't give you a name. They're just flowers that I would imagine grow in the wild. I could have kept that on camera, couldn't I? Right, so we're going to let those dry for just a few, and we are going to take our round brush. There are some flowers that stick in right here. I'm not exactly sure how to explain what they are, but we are going to paint those little buds with straight Perfect Perry, watered down just a hair, not a lot. They kind of remind me of pussy willows or something like that, but they're just little set downs like this. And there's one on the end of each little stem that you have. So you may want to get your pattern out so that you can see where that stem is. They're not all the same size, obviously. So we're just gonna paint in the ends of these little flower buds. They're kind of like teardrop shaped, I guess. Watermelon seed shaped. Ovals with a little point. And then there's another one that's right down here. Kind of just winging it here because I'm not exactly sure where I put my pattern. I know it's there. Just not real sure I can see it all the way. So, just wing it. Okay. Alrighty. So I'll go to the other side and paint these flowers in, and I'll be back. Alright, I'm going to go back to these larger blue flowers, and I put out just a dot of spiced pumpkin. And what I want to do is I want to touch just a little bit of spiced pumpkin in those centers. And that's just going to give it another layer of color and just kind of deepen those centers just a little bit. Doesn't take very much. All right, I think I want to touch a little bit more in those centers right there. Okay, now I want to take my liner brush and get into my warm white again, thin it down, and then I'm going to pick up just a touch of that Provence sky. I don't know if I'm saying that right. I'm not Italian. But I have liner consistency, Provence sky, and warm white. And I just want to very thinly outline these petals, just to define them just a little more. I'm going to say just a lot. Doesn't take much. We just want to outline each of those petals. That just kind of helps to define them a little bit more. Set them apart. Okay, we are going to tap in the centers of these flowers, and I'm going to do that with some lamp black. So you want to use this very sparingly. Just a touch. Don't need a whole lot. So just your liner brush. And just add some little dots to make the centers of these flowers. And obviously I need to go and do the other side. But we'll do a few things on this side and then I'll go and do the other side. So these are very, very, very tiny little dots to form these centers of these flowers. All right. Those little purple flowers that we did, what we want to do is, again, come in with a float of warm white and highlight the tip of each of those. So that's going to take a little bit. Let's get a little closer. So each little flower, I'm going to pick up a little more paint because I know that's going to dry and tone down. And I want to be able to see that I've spent the time, took the time to put a little highlight on the tips of each of these. So again, just touching your brush, your corner loaded brush up into the top of each one of those little, I'm going to call them buds, and try not to get paint all over. That changes the look of them already. and softens them a little bit. So once I get this done, I'm going to stop the video and I'm going to go finish the other side. Alright, so these flowers need stems, and we're going to do them by bringing in a little bit of burnt umber, and we're going to brush mix some burnt umber and some lush green. Try to keep it to the greener side. So probably 2 parts lush green, 1 part burnt umber. And we're just going to give our flowers some stems. Nice, thin stems. On this one, of course, isn't going to get a stem. On these guys, you want to line all the way up to the point of one of those little buds. And then the other ones kind of feed off of arms of each of those. Not too hard. Just don't leave anybody floating. All right. So let's work on some pink flowers. Let's go work over here and work on these pink flowers. And they are going to be based in with, take my slippers off. It's getting a little warm in here. They're going to be based in a wash of joyful pink. Nice pink color, but you do want to be sure to thin it down quite a bit. You don't want it to go on there real bright. All right. And these will take more shape when we highlight them and shade them. So there are 2 flowers and 1 kind of bud right here. Another flower right over here. And as long as we're letting those dry, let's get out a little bit of moon yellow. And we'll paint in the yellow flowers. Again with a wash. And there are several. There's a couple here and 3 here, and then I think there's 3 here. So just base those in real quick with a wash of moon yellow. Doesn't have to take a career. Let's see, 3 here. And 3 here. Okay, so once I get these based in, I'll stop recording and go base in the other side, and then we'll get into adding some detail to these flowers. So we based in our pink flowers and our yellow flowers. And then we'll only have a little grouping of deep purple flower or deep blue flowers down here to do. Okay, I'll be back. All right, so we're going to work on our pink flowers. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to float a little bit of warm white highlighting on the tips of each petal. So a little too much water in my brush. So I just want to define those petals a little by adding a highlight. Okay. Now the bud, I'm going to highlight the top, in the top of it, and then I'm going to come back and add a little highlight on that swirly section, the curved little section that goes through the center. So let's highlight these back petals here. And this one. We've got these petals that kind of lay in the front here. Okay, so I'm going to turn this over and work on the other side. Now, if you can see, I'm kind of dragging this highlighting across the front of that flower to give the idea that these two petals are, you're looking at them from the side. Again, in the top of the buddy part. And let's do these back petals on this big one. And the same thing is going to happen to these. I'm going to kind of drag that color. To give the illusion that those petals are kind of coming from the front. And that'll be more visible when we add the centers. So I'm going to go back to the other side in this bud thing. I'm going to give that center a little bit of a highlight there. And I can do the same thing on this side, I think. All right. So our yellow flowers. These two large ones over here. Well, with all of them, we're going to highlight the tips with warm white. So let's do that first on all of them, and there's quite a few, so it could take a little while. I think I need to pick up a little bit more warm white. Mine is kind of blue, so I'm going to put out some new. I'm just going to highlight the ends of each petal. Still too much water, but we'll make it work. If you had a turntable, that would be really helpful. I have one, and when I put it down underneath, I find I still just pick my piece up and turn it. I don't use the turntable, so I guess if I used it more, I'd be more used to it. So basically, just lightening up the tips of all these yellow petals. Look on these ones. These are more kind of straightforward ovals. More so than the other ones were. Of course, then I change and make that one kind of crazy. So it really doesn't have to take all that long to highlight each of these, unless you want it to take a while. You can take as long as you want. So I'm pretty heavy with the white on these guys down here. So I really want to make those petals stand out just a little bit more. Must be important today. I'm getting lots of texts. All right. So I'm going to go to the other side and do the highlighting on the yellow flowers, and I'll be back. All right, so we're going to work on these two flowers that are off to the right, and their tips have been highlighted. So now we're going to come in and we're going to float some color on the petals with very well blended out joyful pink. So I'm just going to give them just a tint of pink. Going to be hard to tell that they were actually yellow, maybe. It's going to be mainly on the lower edge. And I'm going to grab a mop brush and kind of soften that float a little bit. When you get to this larger front petal, it's going to get tucked up into the base a little bit. Definitely want to separate this petal, this skinny petal, from that wider black back petal, not black petal. And the smaller one, you're going to kind of just tuck it around the center. All right, so these flowers here that were a wash of moon yellow, and then we highlighted the tips and we floated some color on with joyful pink. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to line some detail lines onto these flowers with thinned joyful pink. So you want to get out your best liner. And basically the petals are going to get kind of roughly outlined, but not all the way around. And then you line some little detail lines that come out from the center. So if the petal is kind of wider, you want to line across the top edge a little bit. So not every petal is going to get the top edge lined. Just kind of look at it, and if you think it could stand to be defined a little bit more, go ahead and outline it. There are like 3 wide petals on this larger flower. And again, they're not perfect outlines. Guess I'll go ahead and put some details on that center too. And then the smaller one is very roughly outlined. Again, not all the way around, especially up the sides. It's kind of hit and miss otherwise, and then it gets those little details that come out from the center. Okay, and then we're going to tap in the centers of these flowers with lush green and our liner brush. So just a few little taps of lush green to add some centers. They're a little bit bigger than just a dot. You want to widen them out a little bit. If it's kind of washy, that's okay. And let's pick up some more lush green and tap in these centers. So you should be able to see just little hints of the moon yellow that we started with. All right, and stems. I'll add stems to these flowers and add their little leaves too. That would have been nice to do. And some little leaves on these guys. Not too big. Did I do 2 or 3? I think I did 3. So I hope you enjoy creating with me, because this is totally you're seeing me pick colors and decide which direction this design is going to go. All right. So let's go back to our actual pink flowers over here. And they were based in with a wash of Joyful Pink, and then we highlighted the top edges of the petals, but I feel like those highlights are kind of lost now. They've dried and kind of toned themselves down. So what I want to do is I want to take my liner brush and load it with some warm white that's thinned down just a little. And what I'm going to do is on these petals, I'm going to, especially on these front ones that come across here, I'm going to line those edges, but I'm also going to stroke a little bit, pull a little bit of white into those tops of those petals, just to reinforce that a little bit. We're going to do the same thing to the bud here. I just want to reinforce that highlight a little bit. And on this one, all right, so I'm going to go do the other side real quick so you can see that again. Not that it was all that important, but just kind of reinforcing that highlight with some lines of warm white. Again, the bud gets a little bit. If you need to blend it, that's what a finger's for. That's good. So just a little bit more highlighting. Just to make those petals, the tips of those petals, stand out a little bit more. All right. So we're going to come back and we're going to float some color at the base of each of these petals, and that's going to be with Joyful Pink. I'm running out of places to blend on my palette. So I want to tuck this Joyful Pink into the base of those front petals. Kind of bring them to a point there. And then you can just kind of touch it around the base of the other petals. Deepen that throat a little bit. So I'm going to go in the bottom of this bud, and I'm also going to go down next to that little swirly line through the center. And I'm going to do the same thing on this flower out to the side here. Kind of point, bring those front two petals to a point here. So these are going to stay pretty pink. And then I'm just going to touch it into the base, around the base of these other petals. The center of the two full flowers we're going to paint with Moon Yellow. And it's kind of like a little triangle shape. So what I want to do on those centers, now that I have those in, is I'm going to take just a touch of Spice Pumpkin and put it in the very bottom of that little V. So the bottom half of that little triangle shape is going to get tapped with Spice Pumpkin. And then the top of that little triangle shape is going to get just a little tap of warm white, not too much. Guess you might like to see that. So these flowers have stems also and leaves, and we're going to do those with Lush Green. Thin some down with your liner brush. And let's add the stems to these flowers. And to the bud. Alright, so now we need these. Okay, now it has some calyxes. And we're going to do those with our liner brush and lush green also. So I'm going to do the bud first. So it's just kind of like a squiggly wiggly comma stroke, except, yes, squiggly wiggly comma stroke. So nothing too involved. And the flowers get them too. In fact, you can put a third on there. I get carried away with calyxes sometimes. And this one. All right. So this will be another flower done. Another no-name flower. In the packet it'll probably be called the pink flowers because that's very creative. One more. All right. So I think we're going to move over to these three yellow flowers that are kind of in the center here. And they've been painted with a wash of moon yellow, and they've been highlighted on the outside edge with warm white. So what we want to do with these guys is we want to float just a touch of spiced pumpkin at the base of each of those petals. So they're going to keep more of their yellow than the other yellow flowers did. So I'm just tucking some orange in around the center at the base of each of those petals. And that got a little high, so I'm going to take that off. I'll work on this one while that one dries again. I don't think a whole lot's going to get done to these. I'm going to try to keep these guys simple. Just want to go back and reinforce that orange a little bit. go to the other side. Work on these guys a little bit. Okay, one more little flower to get shaded. 5 more little petals. All right, I'm going to let that dry and then come back and we'll put the centers in on those and line the stems. All right, so we are going to tap the centers in on these guys with burnt umber. So liner brush and a little bit of burnt umber. And just tap some little centers in. Not too big. Get my pattern here and see what I did as far as leaves go. So we're going to line the stems with, I guess we're going to go with lush green again. Keeping us in just those 2 greens. So I'm going to start lining this. I'm going to stop when I get to the blue flowers and then continue on once I get past the blue flower. And let's see, let's add stem there. You can put stems wherever you want. And a stem there. There are also some little long leaves, long skinny leaves that are here. So you can paint those with your liner brush also. Kind of start on the point of your brush and then flatten it out and then come back to the point. And I think I added one in here somewhere. So I'm going to start on the point and then flatten. That's not a very good looking leaf, but you get the idea. All right, so I'm going to go do the stems and leaves on this side. And I'm going to start the bottom here. I'm going to skip those blue petals and then come back up and line these guys there. And then we'll give him those little leaves that we started on the point and then flattened out and came back to the point. All right. So these yellow flowers over here. Those are 6-petal flowers. They're going to have a larger center. And we are going to, we've already based them in with a wash of moon yellow. We've highlighted the outside edges. And so we need to shade around the centers. And I am going to do that with, I'm going to go with spiced pumpkin, but I want to pick up a little bit of the matcha green just to change the color up just a little bit. So it makes it kind of a dirty orange. Just to make it a little different than these flowers up here. And these petals are kind of long and skinny, so you want to touch that shading, make those petals come to a point around the center. So that was spiced pumpkin, and then I picked up a little bit of the matcha green to make kind of a dirty orange to go in the center of these. Trying to limit the palette. I know there are a gazillion colors out there, but just because there are doesn't mean we have to use them all. Sometimes it's nice to work with a limited palette. Alright, so I'm going to reload my brush with spiced pumpkin and then some matcha green. Probably 1 to 1. I brush mix all this stuff, so giving exact ratios is kind of hard. But you can see it's not as bright of an orange as what was around the last flowers we worked on. And thankfully there are only 3 of these flowers, well 6 of these flowers. So it should go pretty fast. All right, I'm going to go ahead and work on these on the other side with the same spiced pumpkin, matcha green. Shading. It's a little bit deeper even than the other side was, but that's all right. They don't have to be the same. All right. One more petal. Woo! Okay. So these centers I'm going to tap in with the lush green. They're a little bit bigger. So just tap in those centers, nice round ones, with the lush green in your liner brush. Let's go get this side. More. And what I want to do is I want to tap in just a touch of burnt umber in the very bottom of those centers. It's not a lot, 2 or 3 taps. Just to darken up a little bit of those centers. And these need to have stems. I'm going to go ahead and line those stems with thinned burnt umber, I believe, just to be different. Let's see, and then I have one that comes this way, goes up to that one, and let's make this one go there. Quick, easy stems to those. With burnt umber. Let's do a few little leaves with our round brush and some thinned, a wash, a really light wash of burnt umber, plus just a touch of matcha. Not going to be a pretty color, but it doesn't have to be. It's just the hint of some leaves there. Not too many. I think 4 is enough. Thankfully, we're not shading and highlighting and lining vein lines and all that stuff. All right. So we only have these little flowers down here. And we are going to paint those in with, I'm trying to think here. We have Provence blue. We need a little bit deeper blue, I believe, for those. So I'm going to go pull, I believe, Royal Navy. We'll see how that turns out. All right, so Royal Navy. It's a very intense color, but it can be very transparent. So you want to thin it down a lot. So thin it down, and when you think you've thinned it down enough, thin it down some more. It'll be much easier to make it darker than it will be to make it lighter. And you're going to use your round brush, and we're just going to paint some little petals. Just really simple little petals. It's a little 5-petal flower. And I don't think this one's going to require a whole lot of shading and highlighting. I think it does pretty well just on its own. So there are 3 flowers. There's actually like 2.5 flowers. There's one that kind of goes off the edge of the canvas down here. And it does overlap those other blue flowers that we have, and that's why we needed to bring a little bit different blue in. And we'll add, let me see, finish this little petal off here. Didn't quite get it all the way. And I think we're going to go ahead and make the centers to these flowers. How about warm white? We haven't had warm white centers yet, so let's do those. And I'm just going to make kind of like one big dot in the center. Get up there on screen. Okay, and they're going to need some stems. So I'm going to try to find my lush green lush green back. I'm seeing every color but that one, right? There it is. I got rid of my palette. I got a new one, so I have to use all new paint puddles. And these are not too involved. Just some little stems to anchor those somewhere into the piece. All right, so I had a little bit of a second thought about these little blue flowers. And so what I want to do is I do want to come in and add a little bit of highlighting on the tips. And that's just going to be with a quick float of warm white on the tip of each of those petals. It doesn't have to be real intense, as I put a real intense one on there. It will toned down, so I'm not too worried about it. So just a quick little highlight float on the tips of those petals. And you don't even have a whole petal there, so. And then I also took my liner brush and a little bit of burnt umber, and I just tapped a little bit of burnt umber in the lower right of each of the centers. And that just kind of finished them off a little bit more for me. I think I'm going to call the flower part of this done. What I do want to do is I'm going to dry these centers. And then what I want to do is just along this edge where all the flowers and the stems are coming out of, I'm just going to very lightly float some lush green to just anchor those to the edge of the canvas. I don't think it needs to go all the way around, and it certainly doesn't need to be a very strong float. But just to anchor those flowers and those stems onto this surface here. Just a little bit of a lush green float. Mop it out so it's nice and soft. Doesn't have to be real intense to anchor those stems. So just keep it really nice and soft. So the next thing we're going to need to do is to put the pattern on for our lettering. Alright, so we have a little dragonfly here that I forgot about. So the first thing I want to do is I want to paint in his little body with some burnt umber. We're not going to do a whole lot of detail on this guy. He's just a little dragonfly. So just his head, his elongated body, and then I'm just going to tap in the bottom of his body. His wings, I want to go ahead and paint those in with warm white. Of course, I could have got that out while I was off camera, but no, I did not. So let's paint his wings in with a coat of warm white, just to give us a base to add some color to it. Okay. Right. We're going to let that dry a little bit, and then we'll come back and do some details on it. All right, what I want to do now is I want to take, my liner brush and some lamp black. I'm going to thin it down just a little bit. And I'm just going to line a little bit of lamp black on the lower edge of the body and each one of those little things that form the little tail. Dragonflies actually do have antennae, but they're really short, so you don't really notice them all that much. don't want to add that hair. So I'm just going to add a little dot for the antenna. It'd be nice, they'd be pretty if they had those big long antenna, but apparently that would get in the way of flying. So what I want to do is I want to get some joyful pink, some moon yellow, and some spice pumpkin, just a dot. We don't need a whole lot of it. And I'm just going to tint the wings a little bit with those colors. So the bottom wing, first I'm going to do is float some moon yellow along the top edge of that bottom wing, those bottom wings. So I'm just kind of tinting. Adding a little bit of yellow to those, the top of those lower wings. The top wings, I'm going to float just a little bit of joyful pink on those. I'm going to do that along the bottom edge. So I'm going to turn my little dragonfly over here. That's a little bright, but I think it'll be okay. Not really going for a realistic looking dragonfly. Okay, and then along the bottom of the lower wings, I'm going to float just a touch of spice pumpkin. I'm going to blend that out really well. So there's our little faux dragonfly. I think I will get my mop brush here and just soften those floats a little bit. So on the little dragonfly, we needed to add a little bit of a highlight. So all I did is took my liner brush and some warm white, and I just did a little kind of dot on his head, a little stroke on his body, and then just tapped a few little highlights of warm white across the top of his little tail. All right, we have lettering on here. Let me back up a little bit. And I'm going to paint that with, I believe I'm going to go ahead and do it with burnt umber. So your liner brush, this one is a number 1 liner. And thin down your burnt umber. Pick up just a touch of lamp black to deepen it a little bit. Make it just a little bit darker. And the key to this is going to be to stay as straight up and down on your liner brush as you can. And watch where you're going, not where you've been. And let's see, I got a little smudgy there. Or I guess that was a spatter. So it really wasn't a smudgy, it was a spatter. Alright, so I'm going to line my lettering. I guess if you wanted to, you could do it with, I would suggest a brown Pigma pen maybe. You don't want this to be too thick. Keep it nice and thin. So I'll probably fast forward through the lettering since there isn't a whole lot to talk about. Just take your time. Don't try to hurry it along. And just to make it easier, because this is a canvas and it has a lot of give, I should have mentioned this sooner, is I've had this piece of wood. It's actually has a slot in it to hold it. What's it called? A clipboard. And so I put that underneath so it gives me a little bit more of a firm surface. And that seems to help a lot. All right, so let's back out of here, and there you go. This is my interpretation of Call of the Wild. I hope you enjoyed this class, and I look forward to sharing other designs with you in the future. Thanks so much.